Hello, bonjour, everyone. I can see that we've reached a critical mass here and we have so much to share today, so we're going to get started. Welcome to everyone on the call today to our conversation today on pathways to jobs. My name is Laura McDonough. I'm the Associate Director of Insights and Knowledge Mobilization at the Future Skills Center. Next slide, please. The webinar today, it's a 60-minute webinar, 1 hour. We're going to begin with a discussion, an overview discussion or presentation from the Future Skills Center on pathways to jobs. And that's going to be followed up with a discussion, little short presentations and discussion with a couple of our project partners who are sort of in the field doing work on the ground, and some Q&A with the audience. At the end, we'll have some closing remarks, but we promise we'll get you out of here on time today. Next slide, please. Want to start with our land acknowledgement. So the Future Skills Center is located within the territory of many Indigenous First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people in the area of Toronto. I'm coming to you today from Ottawa, which is the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. And as a pan-Canadian organization, the Future Skills Center respects and affirms the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. And I invite you to reflect on your own location today and whose land that is. Next slide, please. So a few housekeeping things before we get into the conversation. So this is a recorded session and a copy of the recording is going to be made available to everyone who registered in the coming days. On your Zoom screen panel, you'll see a toolbar that gives you the opportunity to interact with us. We invite you to use the Q&A to ask questions so we can keep track of them. Some of those questions are going to be answered by people sort of behind the scenes, but we'll take some of those questions and have the panelists respond to them as well. You can also use the chat, but encourage you to put those questions to the panelists and to our own director into the Q&A. This is a bilingual event, so please select your audio feed from the interpretation button on your Zoom toolbar. By default, it's going to be off, and you can choose either English or French. Next slide, please. A reminder that this conversation is going to be followed up by one of our peer learning groups on pathways to jobs on April 24th at 11 a.m. Encourage all folks who want to get into a more detailed conversation about how these issues play out in the day-to-day practice are invited to participate and come to that session. So I think we can post the registration link in the chat for folks to register. Next slide, please. Without further ado, I am pleased to present and pass it over to Dr. Tricia Williams, who is the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Future Skills Center. Tricia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Laura. And that you've kept to time, so now I have to keep to time. So I'm just thrilled to have everyone on the call today, and I have the very heavy responsibility of sharing some of what we've been learning at Future Skills Center before we open it up for discussion with some of our project partners. So I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of go over a few things about who we are at Future Skills Center. Thanks for changing the slide perfectly on time. So for those of you who know already, who've signed up for this webinar and saying, oh, we already know who Future Skills is, bear with us. We're going to just refresh for those of you who don't know. We opened our doors in 2019, so gosh, almost 6 years ago now. And we have a very exciting mandate. We're funded by the federal government, but we work closely with provincial, territorial governments across the country to really think about preparing Canada for the future of work. And so we like to say that we're rooted in the here and now so we can make intelligent decisions and plans for the future. So we work closely with the Conference Board of Canada and Blueprint. The center itself is housed at Toronto Metropolitan University, and we work closely with two of the units at TMU University, including Magnet and the Diversity Institute. And we acknowledge the generous support of the Future Skills Program from the Government of Canada. So if you go to the next slide, What do? We fund all sorts of projects and work closely with project partners from coast to coast to coast in Canada. We have a national mandate to test in new ideas and to try new things. So we are not here for the same old, same old. We're here to push the frontiers and to think about what that means for scaling up solutions or to bring, better solutions for workers and the labor market. And as we'll get into, there's no shortage of challenge and opportunity in this area. So we want to future-proof the Canadian labor market. If we move on to the next slide, we have just a couple slides because, we've done a lot of things over 6 years and we've done almost 400 projects. I think that number is real-time data, over 400 now projects with our latest round of investments, over 600 reports. And we're particularly proud that we've been working with so many partners across the country. So many of our projects involve multiple partners. We're trying to find innovative ways to collaborate and find win-win-win collaborations. So that has involved nearly 3,000 project partners. To the next slide. We also have tested a lot of different employment approaches and supported pilot projects. In the course of that testing, over 100,000 people have received training and employment support, direct support services, and over 1 million people have accessed various information or resources or accessed a tool that maybe was developed through Future Skills support. We're really proud of the fact that we've taken such an intentional focus on reaching the needs of underserved and marginalized communities, and we'll hear more about that today. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about why we're doing all of this. We know that economic disruptions are impacting our labor market. And I was just reading the headlines this morning, and no time is this more prevalent than right now. Everyone's thinking, of course, about tariffs, shifts in global trade, shifting relationships internationally, and that impacts employment. But of course, it's not just that. It's also an aging workforce. We've had a really big shift in thinking about our immigration policy over the last 12, 18 months. And I don't know if we've really wrapped our heads around what that's going to mean for the kinds of skills and labor dimensions that we need in terms of how we approach some gaps in our labor supply in Canada. We hear a lot about AI, but of course, it's not just getting skills for AI. It's also about who's adopting AI and who isn't. What are the supports that are available, or what is this going to mean, especially in a country like Canada, where so many of our employers are small and medium enterprises that we know have a lower or slower adoption rate of new technologies than larger, better resourced firms. We also know that Canada has made a pledge to reach a net zero economy, and that will involve shifts in terms of the energy we use, but also who's going to build things. Who's going to expand the electrical grid, who's going to build the new infrastructure, and how does that, how are we thinking about the skilled workforce that we need to meet some of our climate goals? So these are all big economic disruptions, some of which are more recent that we're hearing more about, but some of which have been at play for quite a long time. And what we're tasked with is charting a course forward and identifying some possible pathways out of that. So if we go to the next slide. One of the ways that we've done this at the Future Skills Center is identify 5 focus areas that we think are really critical to Canada's future prosperity and inclusive prosperity through these kind of changing winds. And although this predates the current kind of tariff moment, we think it's holding the framework is holding water, as we say, through that. We're going to talk today mostly about the pathways to jobs, and this is our largest portfolio, has a lot of things involved in it. But just to say, like, if you find we're not talking about tech and automation, SME adaptability, inclusive economy, sustainable jobs, although they'll factor into our conversation today, we have whole focus areas like looking just at those issues as well. So if we go to the next slide. When it comes to pathways to jobs, we know that, as I already mentioned, there's increasing labor market volatility, more job displacement. When we, oh gosh, I got to look at my notes in terms of, we had some recent predictions. So the Conference Board of Canada, who we work with, says that we could see about 160,000 people lose their job in the next quarter. And we are, there's chances that the unemployment rate could rise to above 7%. And we're, looking at the prospect of potentially a recessionary environment in Canada. So then you think, well, what's going to happen to all those workers, right? And I know there are lots of policy folks thinking very keenly about this situation and how to mitigate the impacts of some of these economic headwinds we're in. But we know that also that workers are going to need support. They're going to need support to navigate those changing career pathways and to think about how do they move potentially into new jobs or new sectors. And of course, we hope that some of the impacts on the auto sector, for instance, are temporary. We are reshaping some of our economic relationships, and we know that it could be possible to move people into other sectors and other positions where there is opportunity and there is demand. So if we go to the next slide, we did some research with the Conference Board of Canada that estimated that the cost of not having the right skills has a very real cost, and that it would cost over the last 20 years $49 billion. So what we like to say that we can't count on these things just happening organically. We have to intentionally invest in jobs and skill development to have the right workers in the right place at the right time with the right skills. That's a lot of things to get right, but these things don't just kind of magically happen on their own. We also know that Canadian firms lag American firms in terms of the spending on training. Now, recently that gap has closed a little bit, and for every dollar that's spent by firms in the US, it's 81 cents that is spent in Canada on training. But the gap has closed a little bit, not because we're spending more, but because the US has actually started spending less on training. And when we do look at the kinds of training that Canadian workers are getting, it tends to be more in like the health and safety and kind of basic required training rather than the kind of instrumental skill training that we're going to be focusing on today. So if we go to the next slide, we see a little bit of data here on that investment from employers and workers. And this comes from a regular survey we've been doing over the last several years. The Survey on Employment and Skills, which is a representative survey across the country. And you can see there that even amongst people who say they are doing training, almost a third of them are saying they paid for it themselves. So people are investing in skills training, but we also have to think about how do we do this at scale and across our whole economy. If we go to the next slide, thank you. We also know that around career guidance. So where does somebody even say like, what kind of training do I want to take? What would be good for my career? What would be a good investment for me to take training in? And we see that really pretty low uptake rates of career development services in the last amongst Canadian adults. And that's quite a bit less than when we compare Canada to other countries in the OECD. So we see a lot of people, only about a third of Canadians have participated in training outside the formal education system. And so we see a kind of a recurrent pattern that we tend to be, maybe lagging on some of these things. If we go to the next slide, this is a little bit about what we've done. So what the Future Skills has done, this is our largest portfolio amongst the 5 focus areas I mentioned. Almost $140 million we've invested, done over 100 projects, lots of reports and publications, over 1,000 partners, so lots of activity. And we're going to try to distill out of that a few key points. I'm just going to take 5 more minutes to go over a few of the areas before I open it up to our panel, because I think they'll have the real insights about what this means and what this looks like in some of the work that they've done. So if we go to the next slide, oh yes, we've also done a lot of research. I mentioned already the Survey on Employment and Skills to landscape some of the issues. So before we even get into pilots, a lot of times we're commissioning research to really understand what's happening writ large, including, and I'm sure we can put a link into the page with Survey on Employment and Skills, because it has a wealth of information about kind of getting a pulse check of where people are at across Canada. All right. What we're looking at, what do we mean when we talk about pathways to jobs? And here you're going to see a lot of the kind of key topics that come up in a lot of information, webinars in the skills ecosystem. And that's great. There is a time and a place for digging under and looking very closely at the mechanisms of microcredentials, the mechanisms of labor market information. And we're part of that as well. What we want to do today is situate that all of these things are really contributing to helping people move along those pathways from school to work or from work to work and moving people between different sectors. We're looking at different mechanisms to help people make those transitions in our economy. And today we're going to try to take stock of what it all means and how well are we doing in this area. So you see some of the topics there. If we go to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of some of oh, sorry. I thought we had some other slides in there. Go back, go back. So, all right. So maybe just a little bit on micro-credentials. For instance, we supported a lot of, micro-credential program development and really testing where micro-credentials are effective, where are they not, and looking at what are some of the outcomes amongst employers and learners. Work integrated learning, I think we'll hear some more about it today from some of our project partners in terms of integrating work experiences in the learning environment, specifically in post-secondary. So maybe we'll go to the next slide and I'll say, this is a little bit of foreshadowing why it matters towards the end of the session. But I think we're really interested in thinking about how do we drive more alignment between the needs of government and what policymakers are thinking about and investing in. Industry, how do we make sure that private sector and employers are getting the skilled workforce that they need in the face of all of those contextual drivers that I was mentioning already? But also importantly, workers, how can workers be supported so that when they do potentially lose their job or have their livelihood interrupted because some of these forces that are totally outside of their control, that there's tangible supports and pathways forward into new opportunities. So in that way, we talk about proactive workforce transition planning. We don't think these things happen very well when we leave it to chance. It's through proactively saying, these are the anticipated changes, and these are the ways that we can support people through these kinds of transitions, that we have an opportunity to shape the future that we want and to make sure that those transitions are smoother for individuals. We think that requires a strategic investment in skills, productivity, innovation, that these things have not gone out of style. They are more relevant than ever given the challenges we're facing right now. And that involves maintaining momentum on some of the systems level solutions. So we're going to hear about some system solutions today from some of our partners. Foreshadowing a little bit, but those things are tough. They take some time. They don't necessarily deliver the immediate kind of number outputs that we want. But if we're going to really shift the way that people enter jobs, transition between jobs, and find a level of success that they're happy with in the labor market, we're going to have to think about how those different pieces fit together. All right, so I'm really pleased that I have basically stayed on time so that we are not taking away time from our really amazing panel, which is the highlight of our day today. There is a slide there to say you can connect with us if you want. I think they'll put that information in the chat as well. We have a whole State of Skills series. We've recently published a State of Skills report on micro-credentials and also on labor market information. So I encourage you to check that out. But for now, we're going to have a really interesting conversation with 3 panelists I'm excited to welcome. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. I'm very pleased. I won't read their whole bios, but we have Jamie Grant here from University College of the North, a longtime partner of Future Skills Center. We also have Tang Choi, the senior manager at Calgary Economic Development, who's been working on a work integrated learning pilot called Talented. And JP Giroux, Jean-Pierre, I should say, I should use your full name, JP, the president of the Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium, who's very busy these days thinking about all the shifts in manufacturing with all the employers who are part of your network. I'm thrilled to have all of you here. And I would love to open it up maybe to start by asking each of you to maybe introduce yourselves and take a couple minutes to share a bit of your work that's been related to micro-credentials, work integrated learning, labor market information, and how the changing landscape in Canada is affecting your work in skills and training, given the moment we're in right now. And maybe I'll invite Jamie to start us off, and then we'll go to JP and Tang.
Thank you, Trisha. Welcome everybody. So yeah, just a little bit of background on the work we've been doing at University College of the North. So the department that I manage within the University College is the contract training continuing education. So we work very closely with multiple stakeholders, with industries, with communities, and we do a lot of very neat custom type projects. And one that we were partnered up with Future Skills on was our Women in IT. It was called the Intern Project. It was a project that was designed to get women into the IT field that would have never had the opportunity or even the confidence to even consider IT as a career path. The project was very much built with a lot of support. When I talk about support, mentorship, student supports, we were with those students the entire path through the training, prior to the training start. Life is happening all around the students with kids and daycares and sickness and everything. And we kept them focused. We kept them focused because at the end of it, we were going to link them directly to those jobs in IT. And we had employers working with us directly on internships where those opportunities were available to them. The really unique part of the project was the capacity that once they were completed the training, we then took it a level further to do a train the trainer. We were going to train our students to be trainers for future cohorts. So I'll just leave it at that as just an introductory, but it's been a lot of fun and we've learned a lot along the way that we'll speak to a little bit in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. JP, what's going on at EMC these days?
Oh boy. Busy time, busy time. And first of all, I'd like to say bonjour tout le monde. C'est vraiment plaisant de voir la présence de toutes les régions à travers le Canada. Je vais faire ma présentation en anglais. Toutefois, si vous avez des questions en français, je vais être disponible pour les répondre. Tricia, you mentioned some of the numbers that the Future Skills Centers has been achieved, because that's an achievement. It's kudos to that. And also kudos to invest in innovation. That's the key here, trying to learn from what it works and trying to also to apply this into all sectors. So we're facing some major turbulence in the manufacturing sector, and you're absolutely right about how important it is to be in the moment. I think you touch on that when it comes to the solution, and it's a call for everybody who's a stakeholder in the ecosystem of skills development, or providers, educators, government official, to come up with the right support for the sectors and addressing the needs, whether it's the business or the workers. At EMC, we're an industry led, so our focus on this initiative that we're going to showcase and discuss today was mostly around micro-credential. So it was to build sectorial micro-credentials, all apply to the manufacturing sector, and really to develop a methodology with partners, so we can plan, we can design, we can implement, and we can measure the success of micro-credentials. So we teamed up with the biotech industry, the IT, the agriculture, the aerospace as well, and to look at common elements of what could be a successful micro-credential. And for us, it has to be competency-based. So competency based here, like it could be problem solving, working in teams, but also it could be focus on production. It could be how to troubleshoot CNC machine. It has to be aligned with current industry needs, responsive to the context of the workforce and the workplace, and assessment and validated by industry. And validated by industry is always the missing pieces. And I often say these micro-credentials, they will be as good as the industry validate them and take them. So industry will invest. And you talked about numbers about investment, and small and medium sized, they will invest if they see relevant training out there. And that's the key here. If we can all come together on bringing relevant skills development solution. And one of the things that we find out, and we consulted heavily, around 400 companies were part of the consultation with focus group, is the importance to be rapid with these skills development, very narrow and very rapid. Example of skills training comes from supervisory training to foreign worker integration. It could be numeracy, production-based training. In total, there was about 900 participants that were part of this. So there's a few highlights. Again, I mentioned how aligned it has to be to the industry needs, how easy has to be for a small and medium size to take them on, and how rapid they have to be in competency-based focus. So I'll stop it there, and I'll turn to you, Tanger.
All right, thank you, JP. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from Canada. Great to see a lot of familiar names in the chat and the interaction already. But I'm was the Senior Manager for Strategy and Evaluation, leading the team for the Calgary Work Integrated Learning, or WIL, pilot project that was based within Calgary Economic Development. And with this project, it was the largest known project in collaboration for WIL activities, where we had 7 of our local post-secondary institutions in Calgary, as well as the Calgary Chamber of Commerce and the nonprofit Chamber of Calgary, and of course, the Calgary Economic Development participating in this pilot project. With this pilot project, there was a lot of emphasis on getting these diverse partners that are involved with the work integrated learning process to be able to work together, really compound those benefits of collaboration in order to generate more opportunities for students to gain those skills, and also for SMEs, which were our target audience, to be able to benefit from that skill talent pool. So with this pilot project, it really was conceptualized several years ago by our local post-secondary institutions here in Calgary. They were really the drivers that came up with this idea, and CED, Calgary Economic Development, was the neutral party that was identified to collaborate with this initiative and in the end host the project. So this was to address Alberta's strategy called Alberta 2030, which was building skills for jobs. So with this AB 2030 initiative, there was a lot of emphasis on expanding WIL opportunities for students in post-secondary education to be able to access those opportunities to build skills for jobs. And this initiative, we do feel, has demonstrated that impact, and it ran from really kicked off officially in April 2023, and the pilot phase concluded just recently on March 31st. And as of right now, we're currently exploring funding opportunities for a potential phase 2 of the project.
Thanks so much, Tang. And to all of you for being here. I mean, I think and part of the reason we invited you today is because you represent a wealth of different communities and experiences that you've all worked in issues related to LMI and work integrated learning. And I see one of the questions about work-based learning or work applied learning. So I would love for you to tell us more through this Q&A about your experiences with that. I want to take a step back and say, I set out this presentation with kind of an introduction to say, we are trying to link people to jobs. And what do you see as like the point of all this? The point of all of this, all of these activities and things, is to try to get people into jobs and get to, do those matches. What's hard about that? Like, what is a big challenge that you face? And apologies, this is not a question on the on the on the list, but you knew I would have to go off script. But what is a challenge about that? Because we know that these things aren't easy. We know that, we're facing some headwinds. Tang, I'm gonna go reverse order. We're gonna go back and it was you mentioned you got several post-secondary institutions together. You ran some really interesting pilots. Other than funding, let's just say nobody's allowed to say funding is the hard part, although we know that is. That's always a hard part. But what is really a challenge about, working in this space and trying to focus on solving that core problem through these different approaches? What would you say, Tang?
I think that's a great question, Trisha, and I did give some thought to this question. And I think really what it drills down to is that it takes time for a pilot project to gain momentum. And often, I'm going to mention the F word, funding. Funding, there's limited time frames that you're looking at. Typically 2-3 years is kind of that runway you have with funding. But with a pilot project, especially one like the Calgary Will, which we later rebranded to the Talent Ed YYC pilot project, but like with the project like Talented YYC, when you're bringing together 7 post-secondary institutions, which have different approaches, different ways that they're going about will in their institutions. You're bringing in chambers as well, and SMEs as target audiences. You're playing with a lot of different stakeholders, and it takes time to get things set up. It probably took us a year just from a project planning standpoint, bringing on the secretariat, which was our team for the Talented YYC pilot, and just getting things in place. And then probably another year to start to really kind of get more comfortable with those processes that we developed to be able to do that outreach to SMEs, to get opportunities to be posted onto a portal that we had developed. So when you're looking at that timeline of activity, that's already 2 years, more or less. And really, when we were starting to gain that momentum for the project, that's when the contractual agreements for the funding started to wind down. So I would say that is really a core challenge that we encountered with our pilot project was that, it takes time to build that momentum. And we saw that another key aspect, especially with our target on the audience of SMEs, was that it takes a while to convert SMEs, and conversion in our sense was getting an employer or SME to post a work integrated learning opportunity for a student. Our team connected with over 1,500 SMEs, mainly within the Calgary area. And of that 1,500, over the 2-year time span that we really had more of that momentum with that project or movement with the project, only 16% posted. So that really ties in with what Trisha mentioned in terms of it takes some time to get SMEs to a point where we're starting to see some of that momentum with, in our case, posting work integrated learning opportunities for students. So that would be a key challenge that we encountered.
No, that's super helpful, Tang. And, just for those who are listening and kind of making sense of this, the whole idea of this initiative was that if you were an employer, you could go to this one-stop shop and say, I need a student. I don't know if I need them from the University of Calgary or Royal Roads. I don't know if I need this department or that department. It's all Greek to me, right? But I can come to this one-stop shop and I can post this opportunity. So as you said, that takes some time to kind of understand and socialize with and make sure that we're meeting the needs not only of the students, the learners, but also of the business community who could benefit from having student engagement. JP, the perfect segue to you. What's been hard?
I say the biggest challenge is the rapid nature of change in the economy. Like you think for a second, like 6 months ago, we were living in a different world altogether. And that's true for the manufacturing sector, but it's also true for the Canadian economy. So for me, how important it is, and you heard me a few times, Trisha, to talk about having sound and relevant and timely labor market information. That's the start of everything. So you're talking about what's difficult. It's to build that connectivity between the demand and supply. And that speaks to getting a really good sense of who's hiring, who's laying off. Like now we've seen some just today, like there's flip-flopping around under Canada, moving some of their production to the US. We saw the big automakers. So having a really good understanding, and it gets into at the regional level, at the sectorial level, to get a very good sense of who's laying off in our sector for 100%, and it's true for other sectors too, and who's hiring. So that for me is the starting point. And with this come, and there's going to be some massive change in the sector, in the manufacturing sector. We're entertaining conversation with our entrepreneur CEO on how they can pivot, obviously, to move into what are we buying from the States, like our imports, like the billions of dollars. So that will require skills and skills development and solution and providers that are going to be 100% aligned with the needs and the changing needs. So this is another ball game with the technology that we're facing too. So I think going back to when we talked about it, addressing the current needs, being in the moment, constantly having this LMI data at the national, at the regional, at the local level, because what's true in Victoria, BC, I know there's some people from Victoria, BC, and what's happening in Moncton, New Brunswick, is totally different. We're probably in the same sector. So that's absolutely critical, and it's a challenge. So any way that we could work together to do this better with educators and government is a plus.
Right. It's almost it's been surprising to me coming in from more of an international background that we still struggle to have so many of the basic questions answered in Canada. We have lots of like different buckets of information and silos, and so I know there are lots of really great efforts to try to get to, like you said, JP, just understand that basic LMI. And we've made some progress, but we're not quite there yet, right? In terms of having our finger on the pulse of what's possible. Jamie, so you mentioned you've done some incredible work at UCN, getting women into IT jobs, involved providing a lot of support. You also are in a more remote northern context, which has its own opportunities and challenges and needs. Can you talk to us a little bit about, other than funding, so because I've nixed that from the possibility list. What's been the challenge for you in terms of, really making sure that this program and others can help transition people into jobs and meet their needs?
Absolutely. So yeah, we're located in northern Manitoba. Our demographic, we work very closely with several Indigenous communities, and we talk about severe remoteness. So one of our biggest challenges is accessibility, pure accessibility to training, to education, that isn't housed in First Nation communities. And when they do have to come out of community, that they're supported and that they've got everything that they need to get through programs, to finish programs, to potentially bring those skills back to their communities. So accessibility would be absolutely top of my list. But one of the other things that I think we see very often, and this project in technology is a big one for us, because you don't know what you don't know. So when you're sitting in a remote community in northern Manitoba and you barely have internet access, and until Starlink came out, a lot of these communities did not even have cell service that we worked with. So how do you even think about a career in technology? It's absolutely off the radar. So we have to think big. We have to think future proofing. And so this is where innovation really comes in. And we talk about future skills. Perfect segue into projects like this spark that innovation and that concept that you can do this. We're providing you the opportunity to do this, and we're going to support you the entire way to get through it. And so, because what we are seeing a lot, and not only in several of the programs that we offer, is people will often self-screen themselves out. They will see a social media post about a training program where we have a difficult time filling seats in some programs because of the lack of confidence. They're self-screening out. They don't think that they could do that. The accessibility, they have to potentially be away from home. The technology isn't there. Most people in northern Manitoba work on their phones. And so even something as simple as a computer lab does not exist. So we had to get very innovative in our approach and how we look at training in northern Manitoba. And I mean, it comes with all different facets, but I think exposure is a big one. We need to expose young people into what is available out them. We have over 3,000 jobs in IT in Manitoba that are underfilled, and we have a whole huge workforce of northern Manitobans that could be filling those gaps. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's up to us as educators to really create projects, expose people to possibility, so that we can be putting those people in those jobs that they never, ever had on their radar.
Is there any, Jamie, a follow-up question for you, and that's fascinating and very helpful. I think very real. You know, we need to recognize the diversity of experiences across this country. And it's not just between East and West, it's also with, you know, urban areas and more remote northern areas. Do you do any specific engagement with industry, you know, to facilitate, you were talking about like actually like linking people with jobs afterwards, you know, and what do you find is effective for that industry buy-in? I have a similar question for Tang and JP, but targeted, I think, to the nature of your projects. But can you start us off, Jamie?
Sure. We work very closely with industry. So as Canada is really pushing critical minerals, northern Manitoba has the majority of the critical minerals that Canada is promoting and looking for. And so when we talk about opportunities in the north and working closely with industry, it's important that industry is at the table for us in everything that we're doing in training. Our training has to have relevance. Our training has to have an outcome. And so when I talk about industry, we build a lot of programs like JP and Tang have spoke to that are very driven with industry's buy-in. We're doing this for them. We want people coming into those jobs that they have available and that they need skills for. So our whole department, and I know in my area, everything we do for training has got industry involvement because we need it to be impactful. We need it to fill those gaps, and we need those outcomes, and those outcomes being jobs to be filled. So we don't just look at, oh, well, we're going to run a program and collect a bunch of tuition. We don't operate that like that in any way. Our education is very strategic in timing. You know, it's and it varies. Like I say, it varies with multiple industries. Tech companies are one of them. We work very closely with mining companies, drilling companies, exploration companies. We're working with the healthcare. Our nurses are going into the hospitals. Our healthcare aides are going into the hospitals. So it's multi-sector in how closely we work with industry. It's a integral part of how we do business.
No, that's very helpful, Jamie. JP, there's some interesting questions in the chat that are coming through for the panel, and maybe I'll summarize a couple of them and try to merge them together specifically for this. So one is, obviously, you know, you represent, what is it, 8,000 small and medium enterprises across, you know, Canada in the manufacturing sector. You tell me the membership numbers specifically. But then on this micro-credential element, so one is like, what do you think about how people should engage industry? So say you're representing, service delivery or a post-secondary or something. How do we actually engage them in thinking about this? And then, there was also questions around, so you have a micro-credential. Then like, what does it mean to be industry validated? How do we know? And I'm summarizing the question here. I think they said it even better. Um, uh, can you give a concrete example of a micro-credential that's been rolled out that fits that kind of criteria you were talking about? See,
Okay.
competency based, aligned with industry needs. And I know this is exactly the project we did in partnership with you. So can you give a little bit of a concrete example of that?
I'll start with the second one, about industry validation. That's a real challenge. Like in our world, 98% of the audience is small and medium-sized business. So we do what EMC has been doing industry certification for years, for 10 years, mostly on supervisory training and production workers and so on and so forth. But the answer to the question is and it's, you've got a small window to get validation from an employer, because you know how busy small and medium-sized companies are. Like, it's to simply ask a question at the end, and I'll say it in very concrete term: does this micro-credential advance my performance or the performance of the company in the workplace? So that's a question. That's a direct question. Whether it's and we do a lot of problem solving or system thinking. That's one of the signature program at EMC, where we like to teach or to bring problem solving techniques at all level. From the shop floor to the CEO. So we have common language and common way to address problems, and we know how important it is. So that's an example, and we like to go back to the employer directly, and the learner as well. Like, there's another set of questions. It's like both ways. Like, does this work for the employer? Does this work for the workers? But we cannot throw a survey of a half an hour to an employer. They're going to disconnect in 2 minutes. So it has to be very narrow, very focused, and it gets into the assessment too. Like sound micro-credential has to have some check for your understanding and learning on that front. Just on quickly on how you do consortium work, or I think your question was around on how you mobilize industry on common interest. I think this has to go back to the consultation. Like, if you don't consult, and Jamie was saying an example that she constantly have the industry at the table. That's the hard work. Like, I mean, coming up with training content and instructional content, like you go on ChatGPT, you're going to find all kinds of great example. It's the consultation to contextualize that training and to have the real example and the customization that is required for an employer to say, oh, aha, the famous aha moment, like, this is relevant to me and I could see taking this on. But I mean, not replacing their own strategy and their own training that they have to do in their shop, but it's like finding the common denominator at the sectorial level for manufacturing. Like, what is the 80% that could be applicable to a sectorial group? So that's some of the things that we're doing at EMC.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I like to say every project, when people apply for funding with FSC, everyone says they consult employers, right? Everyone checks that box. But what does that really look like, right? And I think both of you have given some great examples of what that really means. It isn't just one and done. We held a round table and then we're going to go off and design our program and goodbye. It's about, very deep partnership. that is, and it's thinking about often, I think in a learning delivery context, thinking about having two clients in mind, not just the student, but also the employer, the industry, and having what we call a dual client approach, and thinking about how are you serving both of those groups and helping facilitate that in a very intentional way. And I think that is it. We're in the midst of a shift in thinking about that, right?
It's
Um,
it's it-
yeah,
it's doing our homework, and
yeah,
then and you bang on with the learners, but also with the employers and the trainers. Like there's
yeah,
kind of a triangle there.
yeah.
Your point, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the exciting moment we're at with microcredentials is we certainly know that post-secondary can design and deliver these, right? And I say like there's instances of great programs at almost every institution, right? But how do we make those great programs the norm, right? The norm, or that is the usual experience that you get, like really good employer engagement and good student success and good, job placement metrics afterwards. That's where we talk about scale and sustainability. When it comes to work integrated learning, a similar set of challenges, I think, around meeting dual needs. There's some questions, Tang, about that I wanted to pose to you in your experience. So you mentioned 16% of the employers you reached out to. What was it about those 16%? Was there anything you think that worked particularly well in terms of the industry engagement? And then I also want to invite you to tell us a little bit about there was a question here about, well, what was involved in the WIL experiences? It wasn't just internships, and I know this is a little under the hood, but there was a massive effort around to develop even a common lexicon or taxonomy amongst the institutions, right? What somebody called a co-op was different than another institution, or what somebody called an internship was different than at another institution, of course. When you're an employer looking for a student, you don't really care, probably. It's all words to you. So can you maybe describe some of the ways that you saw, these experiences that you were able to facilitate benefit not just the students, but also the employers? Were there any kind of good examples that came out of that?
Sure, yes, and I can definitely set the stage by answering, I believe it was Bruce's question about what types of work integrated learning did that involve. So for our project, we did do traditional types of WIL, like your co-ops, internships, field placements. Those were opportunities that our employer engagement tried to source or tried to get SMEs to post opportunities in, but we also did innovative work integrated learning opportunities as well, which were the ones that you listed, Bruce, like the case competitions, boot camps, hackathons, and classroom industry projects as well. So we did do both, and our team generated over 3,200 opportunities from those areas for students to be able to participate in. And from the SME side of things, our employer engagement team was really focused on raising awareness about WIL. When we first started this pilot project, we brought on Stone Olofsson, which is a local market research firm, and they did a survey for us and also some focus groups. And from that survey, we found that over 40% of SMEs felt like they were working over capacity. When you have businesses that feel like they're really stretched, then one of those links that we're looking at is making that bridge to work integrated learning, where student talent can perhaps help support some of those needs. I know there's another side of the coin where that it's like, oh, how do we have time to train the student? I know that's another element of it, but that was one aspect that our team wanted to just raise awareness that work integrated learning was an option for SMEs, because when we looked at the familiarity side of things, which Stone Olofsson also explored, we saw that within the Calgary area at least, only around half of the folks surveyed or respondents said that they had some sort of familiarity with work integrated learning, and less than 25% were very familiar with work integrated learning. So we saw a lot of potential for SMEs to even learn more about what work integrated learning was and what those benefits could be for their business or organization. Our team also did a lot of referrals to funding delivery partners. So these were funders that employers could go to or approach, organizations could approach to see if they qualified for a grant or a wage subsidy, because sometimes being able to afford to bring on that talent is a challenge. And we found a lot of uptake with that. And actually, we have a list of those funders on our website, which is still live until September 2025, just so SMEs, post-secondary institutions can still access those resources. And our team also supported with scoping out that student opportunity. So for some of the organizations which were new to the whole process, maybe they didn't know where to start, how to even draft a job description for a student to join the organization, that was support that our team provided as well. So that's where we really start to see that high touch approach that our team took to really show that support for an SME. And that's likely a part of that rationale when we start to look at that conversion rate, that takes time. It takes time for someone to actually decide that they want to bring on a student and then go through that entire process. But we did have a success story. I'll highlight one where
That's final comments.
yes,
We're on our
well,
last couple minutes.
with Sizeware International, which was geoscience software solutions. They did post with us through our portal and then returned 2 more times to post. And they did bring on marketing and office admin student, and we did recognize them with an early adopter award at our Connect Ed Expo, which we just held in March.
These are hard things, Tang, and I know, tremendous effort underway in Calgary to really provide that kind of background support. So congratulations to you and the team for what was accomplished there. Yeah. I want to offer JP and Jamie also a chance to say any final parting words or thoughts about what's next. Jamie, you want to start?
Sure. I would just say we need to do more. We need to let's not do templates. I say that the status quos, the templates, like we have to be innovative. We have to adapt to change. That is the world we're living in, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. We have to be responsive. But we have to be inclusive. So when I say that, it's important that everybody has an opportunity, no matter what their situation is. And that will force us to really have to think how these projects are being designed, where people will have those opportunities. I think we can do some really amazing things across Canada. And to get our people into those jobs that normally just would never have a chance. That to me is the big win. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. JP, you get the final word.
Really, to pick up on what Jamie said, I mean, there's a call for collaboration more than ever. I talked about LMI, how important it is. It's changing on a weekly basis in our case. Like we're monitoring and having the data of what is the state of affair is so important. And finally, and I think there's a lot of educator and government official in this room, like better connectivity at the local level. Like, I mean, between employer, industry, association, iSchool, they have a big role to play. Colleges, university, anybody that is working with the supply, the next generation, that's a call for better connectivity, and this is the way to go, and we know this. It's just an execution that needs to happen.
I love how you foreshadowed future sessions we need to do. All right, thank you to everyone so much for joining. It was tremendous, and I see some people are jumping off. I think we're going to take our last minute. I'm going to give it back to Laura to close us off.
I just want to extend our thank you to everyone for attending, to the speakers for a great discussion, to Tricia for the presentation and excellent moderation. I invite everyone to follow us. We're on LinkedIn. We're now on Blue Sky, so please follow Future Skills for any future updates. And as you leave, please take time to fill out the survey. We're evaluators. We want to know what works, what doesn't, and for whom. So take a minute and let us know. Thanks very much and have a great rest of your afternoon.